I see preparing live stream. Welcome. Welcome to the ripple effect. David, you see that we are confirmed for live streaming to Facebook.
Okay, good. I'm always a little late to get the clearance here, but I got it. Good to hear. Thanks for checking. And yeah, welcome to the ripple effect, everyone. Erica and I are here, and Erica got a guest for us today, so we're excited to get to her. But what's new with you, Erica? Is there anything you want to announce or share before we get to our guest?
Yeah, I've been having a fun time being in the community this past week, and I did a talk last Wednesday that was a success, and I'm gonna do another one April 2nd, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, and it is called the Radical Self-Care Cafe, stolen from a friend. Radical self-care for bringing up your vibrations. So if you're a free or you want to know more about it, just reach out to me. And I'm so happy to see you, David. What's new and exciting with you?
I'll put your website in the comments there if you have more info on that event there. I'm good. We're um, Carrie's progressing in her swimming, so we're excited about that and starting to feel like spring, so you know how you come out of this winter period. Of course, it's like a bit of a false spring right now, but it's
Yes,
been
I
a
have proof of
fairly cold,
spring.
wet winter, so you know,
I
things
have
start looking a little nicer.
It's nicer. Yes, the spring energy is definitely happening. Here is a visual of spring happening here. Like these guys are getting bigger.
I
My
know
little
we're spoiled in California because winter is way shorter and summer starts earlier too. It's kind of, but yeah. So
you see that?
yeah, spring break's already coming up. First week of April's the like one spring break. So yeah, on the horizon. Well,
It's
good.
great
Well,
that,
let's get to our guest. I can read. You
yeah,
want to read her bio, or you want me to read it?
I can read it if you want me to. And thank you for being here, Carol Banens. After losing her husband 6.5 years ago, Carol transformed her grief into a mission to help others navigate loss. 4 years into her own journey, she became a grief coach, guiding widows and widowers to integrate their grief and rebuild life without guilt or a disconnection. A former physical therapist, and also the author of now 3 books, right?
Yep.
Kintsugi Your Heart, The Art of Living with Grief, a book of grief poems, and Grief Unmasked, the 10 most common myths and misconceptions. We're so happy to have you, Miss Carol.
So
Yay.
nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's so great that you could hop on from not in our country. You are a next door friendly neighbor.
Sort of, yes. I'm in Canada. Say no more. Yes, we are a friendly neighbor.
Please.
Yes, yes, I'm in Ottawa and it's snowy, David. So stop talking about your love. Although it's nice, it's about 10 degrees. I think it's quite pleasant. So I'm hoping there's going to be quite a bit of snow melting.
Yeah, I do love the snow, and actually, one of my favorite YouTubers on photography does a bunch of videos all around Canada. So it actually comes across really good in video, even though I know it is chilly up there. I'm half Swedish, so we like the snow and the
You like the
cold
cold and the
weather.
snow. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so you have become this grief coach, and we want
Mhm.
to hear more of your story. Just your bio says a little bit, but what do you want to share about how you've gotten to this moment?
Well, it's not something I had ever considered. I mean, I'm not sure many people do consider, oh, I want to be a grief coach. So I was a physiotherapist, physical therapist for you in my friendly neighborly state country. Um, and my second husband, Brian, developed lung cancer in 2012. And we had a 6 year journey of cancer until he died in 2018. And I loved my job. I just loved it. But Erica, as a therapist, you have to be very present with your clients, patients. And I was dealing with chronic pain patients. That's who I looked after. And I would go in and I'd say, "How are you?" And I'd put the facade on of "I'm fine, I'm okay." And I went back to work 3 days after Brian's funeral, which was of course silly. And it took me about 3 years, but I burnt out. I just couldn't keep that up any longer. So I took some time away from work. I took a month off and then decided, yeah, I'm changing. And then I did life coaching courses and transformational life coaches, and I was going to be a pain coach because that's what I knew. And I said to someone, I think maybe I'm going to be a grief coach. And that's really where my heart lies. It was such a difficult journey, such an unknown. I had no idea. I had no idea. And I think most people don't have any idea about grief, what to expect, and you think you'll go back to normal or you'll get over it. And these are all these terms that people say, but we don't. It changes you profoundly. And so, yeah, so I became a grief coach. And from that, I became an author, which is something I never, ever thought I would do. And
A
the
big deal.
poets, yeah, well, poetry, I'd never written poetry before. And I think really it was just really an outpouring of my emotions that I had pushed down for so long. And that probably was the most healing thing that I did, was that outpouring.
Yeah, you read to me one of your poems a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like, ah, delicious. And there's no shortage of grief right now, and not just the loss of a loved one, but all different kinds of grief. You're supporting people with that, yes? Or is it more
I
focused on
do. I mean,
um,
you sort of focus down on what you know, sort of widows, whether it's a widower. But I've seen people for pet grief, for miscarriages, which is a very disenfranchised grief where people say, well, it wasn't really a baby. But if you've got a child or if you're pregnant, the moment you hear that, you start to build this dream of a child. And so it's very
Mm.
important that we understand that everybody's loss is important. David Kessler says your loss is the worst loss. And yeah, I mean, if I think about physiotherapy, I was seeing people in chronic pain. Their grief was, I can't go back to work, or I can't walk anymore, or I can't do any of my hobbies. So many things. Yeah, there's a lot of grief about worrying, sort of worldwide grief, what's going on in the world. We have grief over divorce. I didn't know that was grief when I went through a divorce. And there are about 40 different types of grief. And so we all will experience it.
Hmm. Somewhere, somehow it's around
Someone,
us. There's the
yeah.
losses happening, and then there's all the other kinds of grief. So fascinating. And I got to attend one of your grief cafes. Do you want to share about your grief cafe? It's such a
Yeah,
lovely way.
absolutely.
And
So I
then your
thought,
upcoming class. So tell us
yeah,
about
of course. So I hold a free grief cafe once a month. And I thought, you know what? I like the idea of a grief cafe. And for people to just come and share about their grief, because sometimes there aren't places where you can do that. And as a griever, you often want to talk about what's going on, how you're feeling about your loved one. And honestly, it's hard for friends to keep hearing it, to keep hearing that story over and over, partly because they don't understand, partly because we think she should be okay. It's about a year now. Oh God, she wants to go through it again. So I thought a grief cafe is a place where you can come and tell me that story every month for as long as you need to tell me. You can ask questions, you can be supported, you can hear other people's grief journey. So it really, you're not alone. And so that's where the grief cafe came from. So
It's so
anybody,
great.
and that's specifically for anybody grieving the loss of someone rather than divorce, because it is different. They are slightly different, although you're grieving, it's a slightly different thing, really.
Yeah,
And then,
I love what you created, and the space was awesome. And it's a little early in the morning for us Pacific Standard people, but worth it if you can get up to go. It's on the first Thursday in each month,
month, yep, at 9:30 EST, and yeah,
and
like I
yeah,
say,
6:30 PST. So
it is early.
We have some of our links we'll share.
yeah, it
Um,
was wonderful. I could feel the energy of support that, rippled out to your participants and myself. And oh, it was juicy and lovely. And kindness around this topic that's not always easy to talk about. I think everyone felt empowered and supported and safe to share. And that was so juicy.
So
You can
special.
quote me on anything I say on the front cover of the New York Times or Daily News or whatever you want. So, just like that, here we go. We're gonna, like, the second I got into the cafe, you were like, who are you grieving? And I was like, I had it. Like, it was just like a second, and I was like, I'm grieving my friend Carolyn, and it was a beautiful way to start my day. And thank you for creating this beautifulness. It was just lovely. The rest of the day, I felt it was supported and empowered.
Well,
Carol,
thank you.
so I have a question for you. I was gonna ask, we like to kind of show how you work or some examples on this show, and I was gonna say, what are some things you see from people who try to deal with grief all on their own versus people who maybe they discover your group or they start working with you? What's the difference there, and versus kind of white knuckling it, so to speak?
I think the thing that I've learned, David, is that everybody's different, and a large proportion of people are fairly resilient and will manage their grief, and in fact don't necessarily need professional help. There's about 7% of people that will go on to develop prolonged grief disorder, which is where their function is very, very limited. But I think everybody can benefit from support and understanding and education about grief. So I think the difference is that when people, one of my clients yesterday said, when I used to have those grief bursts, I didn't really know what they were. And and now I know it's normal. And I think if we can normalize grief and help people to understand, even if they only come once or twice, then they can start managing it themselves. Um, I white knuckled it. I didn't do too well. I thought, well, I can manage this. I'm strong. I've read books, except I couldn't read much after my husband died. And so by 3 years, I really had to reach out for some help. And so I think the thing is, if you can get some support, they usually say after about 6 months, because initially you're really in it. But I would say that you can still get education before that so that you know what's normal, so that you know what to expect, and that you're not thinking, is this right? Should I be further along? And then you start comparing. So I think education early for anyone is helpful. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Hold
And
on.
I was just thinking about some of your poetry and how some of those poets, I'm thinking back to like Ralph Waldo Emerson, somebody who I really like, about the loss of his first wife and how you see that in his work. And I almost still feel that loss even today, just from hearing him talk about it and how it affected him from his biography. So it is one of the most impactful things kind of in our whole life um, to
It
be able to
is.
deal with and come out with some positive aspect, after you come out of it.
That's such a good point, David. What they say is for the loss of a significant other, it takes about 5 to 8 years to come back to some sense of normalcy. That's a scary number, isn't it? I can remember somebody being told that. I didn't tell her, it was very early on after her husband died, and she was so angry. She's like, why would they tell me that? And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a little early to hear that. But the point is, it is profound. It is like you've lost a part of yourself, like you don't know who you are anymore. And if anybody wants to read The Grieving Brain by Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, that tells you a lot more why, or The Grieving Body. But yeah, it changes everything when somebody's gone. You're no longer feeling like you relate to the world, especially if it's a partner. You tend to relate to them through the partner and through your relationship, rather than just saying, I do this. It's like, well, we do this. We like Thai food. We like to go to the movies. And when that's gone, it's trying to figure out, who am I without that person? And that can be quite tough. That's where you need guidance and support, I think.
Beautiful. And you have an upcoming class on Thursday. Remind us the time and
I
how to
do.
sign
It's a
up.
better time. It's March 13th, this Thursday, and it's at 4 p.m. EST, and it's called The Healing Journey, Tools for Coping and Nurturing Yourself Through Grief. And it's an interactive class. It's a low cost class. It's 27.97. Just throw that out there. And
Worth
it's
it.
mm, and
Worth
it's
it. Worth
yeah,
it.
and it's just really so that I can really, I do workshops where I educate, but I want to take people through some of the things that I do with clients so they can go away and go, okay, I can use this. This will help me. So we're going to do some of that. So I'm quite excited to do that.
Erica mentioned that you might be willing to share some of your poetry with us.
Oh, I can. Well, you mentioned growth, didn't you? About growth. Let me see if I can find that one, growth through grief. Um, and there is something called excuse me, post-traumatic growth, post-grief growth. Not everybody is going to grow through their grief. I think we have to be honest about that, but I think there are gifts in our grief for some of us, and mine was creative writing. So here we go, growing through grief. Initially, I felt like an emaciated flower, lifeless, wilted, sorrowful. My petals had turned brown, falling one by one, leaving a bare stalk. But as time went on, I started to nurture this plant, watering it with love, with self-compassion, seeking help to support it, feeding it daily with kind words. And slowly but surely, it started to respond. The stalk became firmer and able to stand alone, new buds appearing with petals unfurling, until one day, quite surprisingly, my flower was in bloom, its scent filling the room with fragrance. Growth through grief is possible with loving attention, with the tender care of the gardener of your soul.
Hmm. That's awesome.
Thank you.
It's like time and care is like a big ingredient, like letting time go by and caring about
Yeah,
yourself.
I think it's what you do in that time, isn't it? You know, we all hear, oh, time heals all wounds, and it's not true. You have to, I always think you have to be an active participant in your grief. Um, and that means being able to express yourself, hence the Grief Cafe, being able to mourn, outwardly express the grief, and being open to taking steps and acknowledging that whoever it is gone. And it is hard, it is, but coming to a place of acceptance and then going, okay, so now how do I live the life I have left? So it's time, and within that time, I think self-care is one of the most important things. That's why my the third book was Self-Care During Grief, 10 Essential Practices. You know, how can we look after ourselves? How do we get support? How do we use breathing exercises or mindfulness or gratitude? Any of these things to help us through that grief journey, which is really one of the most challenging of our lives.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned not doing much reading when you in your grief, and I find sometimes when you don't feel like reading, it's easier to listen to things or maybe join a meeting. I don't know if you have like an audio program for your books or that people can just jump on your Zoom meeting and maybe they don't even have to have the camera on or whatever, but you know, to
Yeah,
hear how to some coping mechanisms, yeah.
I do have the audiobook for the poetry. Yeah, I do.
Oh,
I
cool.
haven't got the others because they're just new. And I have a YouTube channel people can go to, so there's stuff they can listen to there in small, you know, sort of 5 minute things in the Grief Cafe. And people do sometimes come to the Grief Cafe and not put their camera on, and that's fine. It's whatever's comfortable. But it was a shock to me. It was something I didn't realize that, oh my God, I can't read. I couldn't focus after grief, and that took months and months to come back. I mean, I'm a big reader. I just couldn't focus. Two sentences was all I could really take in. So hence the newer books that I've written are shorter. They're easy, you know, just easy bite-sized things for people to take in because I know it's so hard.
Yeah. I see your YouTube channel, Kintsugi Your Heart, Carol Banens Journey, or is that's on somebody else's YouTube channel?
Maybe somebody else's, or I
That's
might post
somebody-
it on mine, but no, there are mainly lots of little ones. I think I talk about disenfranchised grief. I talk about all sorts of different things, you know. Is the second year harder than the first year? All of this sort of stuff.
This is great. You're all over the place. A great way for people to tune in and reach out. How do you appreciate people reach out to you if they want to chat and have a little consult?
They can go to my website, they can drop me an email from there, or they can book a call. Either one is good. Or
Awesome.
message me on social media. I'm on social media, so any
Awesome.
any of those ways are good.
Okay, awesome. So I hope that people tuning in feel empowered and inspired to get with you and to come play with you. And, just what a beautiful way you've pivoted to help
Yeah,
with that emotional pain of grief.
yeah, thank
It's
you.
so cool. I love it. Um, and anything else that you want to say to your studio audience? The
My
ripple
studio
effect?
audience, what I would say is remember grief is a whole body experience. So don't be surprised if you've got physical aches and pains. That's my physiotherapy background. You've got cognitive issues, the brain fog, the inability to read, make decisions, couldn't make decisions and think straight, plus the emotional stuff. So you have all that going on. So what I would say is please reach out for support. It doesn't have to be me, but reach out to support to people who can hold that space for you and not tell you how to do your grief or that you should be over it. You need to have a non-judgmental space, um, loving, kind space, and self-compassion. I think that's important in self-care. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's a beautiful thing to have time with you. I feel like we had our own energetic exchange here today. David,
Yeah.
do you feel it over there in Arinda?
Yeah, I do, and great, good work. I think it can be useful to have some positive energy in your support system, and we appreciate Carol providing that an example of that for folks who may be out there who could use
Oh,
that.
thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. And this is our ripple effect on out. Thank you for having us and being part of this journey of all sorts of amazing speakers. Carol, you are awesome.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you, you guys, for inviting me. I really appreciate having a stage to talk about grief and share.
Very good. Well, thanks for joining us on the Ripple Effect, everyone. We'll put the comments in the comments some of your contact info and your channel and your website. And thanks for coming on.